With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yulana Weeks.
Our top stories.
8 years on, the Nevis Athletic Stadium lies incomplete at Low Ground Estate.
St. Kitts Nevis Sustainability Minister advocates for retransition to sustainable lifestyles at International Summit.
Global Recycling Day. Minister Joel Clark promotes a more sustainable future by encouraging recycling and reducing plastic waste. Nevis Island Administration Minister Spencer Brand says the joint cabinet meeting was timely and important.
St. Kitts Nevis focuses on sustainable consumption in commemoration of World Consumer Rights Day 2025. St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Gonzalez in Venezuela for meeting with Maduro on tensions with Guyana. Grenada's Dr. Keith Mitchell is doing well following a medical emergency. Internationally, European Union proposes cutting steel imports by 15% as U.S. tariffs bite. Now, the details.
Getting a fully outfitted athletic stadium turned out to be a distant dream for Nevisians, as the Nevis Athletic Stadium lies incomplete 8 years after its opening. A wide array of amenities was promised and anticipated, including a 400-meter track, sitting area, soccer field, parking area, ticket booth, emergency platform, gazebo and garden, water closet for males and females, players' lounge, conference room, lobby, gym, bathroom with showers, fire stairs, storage, and a Hall of Fame, amongst other things. To date, there is a soccer field surrounded by a 400-meter track, a few temporary seatings and bathrooms, a parking area, and ticket booths, whilst the majority of the planned amenities are yet to be fulfilled. Nevis Reformation Party's candidate Rohan Isles expressed his disappointment on the matter.
I mean, it's really disappointing because what we were sold 8 years ago isn't half of what we have now. Mm-hmm. And it is a case where it seems as if we are going to get to the completion of the facility and then have to really resurface. Mm-hmm. And that is unfortunate.
Apart from being a world-class facility where Nevisian athletes could train and compete, the Nevis Athletic Stadium was also intended to spark a new economic thrust in sports tourism, with the hosting of athletic and football teams from cold North American countries once completed. Further disappointed, Alza shared that because the facility is incomplete, Nevis has not been able to capitalize on the increased footfall of visitors, nor see real economic benefits generated by the facility.
What really bothers me is the lack of economic opportunities that should have been had, should the facility have been completed. When you talk about winter training, and maybe people don't understand the level of influx we would have had. Because Canada is just one place. You have the US, you have other North American countries that would have found it really nice to come here to train.
The impact of sports tourism extends beyond the stadiums. It creates a demand for accommodations and boosts other sectors, considering the influx of spectators, athletes, media personnel, and sports enthusiasts visiting the destination.
When you have certain developments, Mr. Manners, it forces you to look at other critical areas. Because with a national stadium, a completed stadium, a world-class stadium, having been able to attract regional high-level events and even football events because the surface was said to be FIFA approved. It then forces you to look at your room stock because in order to host certain games, you're going to need the hotel rooms. And so one particular development drives that interest and that impetus to get more of a certain space.
As asserted that, like St. Kitts, Nevis should have been hosting some major sporting events at its stadium. He said candidly that there is no reason why Nevis does not have a completed stadium in 2025.
President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Daniel Best, has raised concerns about the geopolitical shift in the United States, emphasizing its impact on the region. Speaking at a press conference in Bridgetown, Barbados on Wednesday morning, Best revealed that more than US $200 million in projects have been stalled. Early assessments conducted by the bank. These projects include critical early warning systems essential for regional safety.
We have already done an initial analysis. And I think we all appreciate the fact that to say the situation is fluid is a bit of an understatement, right? So we've done our economics team has done an initial assessment. One of our early findings is that at this moment, there is approximately US $280 million in undisbursed obligations to the Caribbean from United States funding, whether it is USAID or other spaces. 80% of that is to Haiti. So this is not an immaterial situation that we're dealing with. Now, and the fact that the United States is not a member of the Caribbean Development Bank or doesn't contribute to our funds is called comfort, because we are of the Caribbean and we have a mandate to support the Caribbean.
In response to these challenges, the CDB is actively engaging in discussions to address the funding shortfalls.
So what are we doing to respond to this? Well, firstly, we have already convened meetings with CARICOM agencies that are being directly impacted, such as SEDEMA, the OECS Secretariat, and others that are being directly impacted, to seek to determine which space CDB could respond better in. One that concerns me greatly, of course, is the matter of early warning systems and the technical support we get. Ms. Isaac mentioned it in her speech. Resilience is not just about funding, it's about impact. And we have within the bank the technical expertise to support in areas where there will be a gap in the United States support, not necessarily in funding, but in United States support. But secondly, I am particularly pleased, I know I said it in my speech, but I am particularly pleased that notwithstanding what we're seeing on the geopolitical landscape, our contributors sought to increase over the 10th cycle of the Special Development Fund for this 11th cycle, which was approved at the end of last week, by US $77 million. That's a record $460 million in funding for our Special Development Fund for the 11th cycle.
BIAS confirmed that the bank is seeking alternative sources of funding to mitigate the impact of reduced financial support from the United States.
These funds will go towards filling exactly what you are speaking about, responding to the most vulnerable in terms of early warning system, climate disaster mitigation, diversity, equity and inclusion, gender equality. These are the spaces where our funds will, I think, come in most handy at a time like this. And then finally, we need to further bolster partnerships, new partnerships. I think you may have seen on social media and other platforms that I've already started reaching out to some what we may term non-traditional partners. And in a few weeks' time, we will be traveling to some different spaces, and you'll see more about that. But we need to mobilize more resources for the region, not just for the bank, but to fill exactly the gap that you're speaking about. Because I mentioned $280 million, but I want us to consider how many lives, livelihoods, and life chances are being impacted by the absence of these resources. And we are prepared to step up with our traditional partners, with the SDF, and with new partners to respond to this gap.
Since taking office, U.S. President Donald Trump has paused foreign assistance while reviewing its alignment with U.S. interests. This includes a freeze on funding through the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, leading to the suspension or cancellation of numerous projects and programs worldwide.
In commemoration of World Consumer Rights Day 2025, the Honorable Dr. Joel Clark, Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment in St. Kitts and Nevis, addressed a global audience at the closing of Consumer International Sustainable Lifestyle Summit. The summit, themed A Just Transition to Sustainable Lifestyles, convened experts and leaders worldwide to discuss strategies for promoting environmental conscious consumption. Dr. Clark's participation underscores St. Kitts and Nevis's commitment to integrating sustainable practices into national policy and advocating for global cooperation. Dr. Clark emphasized the need for consumers to revert to fundamental principles of resourcefulness.
So I'm very happy that we're gathering under the theme of a just transition to sustainable lifestyles. But for us as islanders, it's almost like a retransition, a tracing of our origins of consumption. Because for our lived experience, we are ripe with instances of sustainable lifestyles where it's in our fiber, it's ingrained in our livelihoods. And our elders, even though they weren't very technical in their perspective, when they said, waste not, want not, we have a propensity to reduce, reuse, upcycle everything from our shopping bags, the jars, our containers, and a readiness to conserve our environment, whether it's in the way we fish, the way we farm, the way we take only what's needed and share what we have. These are organic actions that we can retrace and we can reinvent and transition to in terms of sustainable livelihoods.
She encouraged individuals to cultivate greater awareness of their purchasing habits, waste disposal methods, and overall treatment of the planet.
So now we have to consider conscious consumption as an ideal or an aspiration instead of what it is, quite possible and a quite regular practice. So when we speak of sustainability, we ought not to speak of it as if we're grasping in the ether, as though it's devoid of human action or interaction, but really that it requires human action for us to consume sustainably.
Her call to action aligns with the growing global recognition of consumer behavior's critical role in achieving sustainability goals. The discussions held during the summit were particularly relevant as sustainable lifestyles are slated to be a focal point at COP30 in Brazil and the United Nations Environment Assembly in Kenya later in 2025.
So when we frame it this way, our path forward always encompasses some amount of going back to what was simple, what was taking only what you need, and ensuring that we protect the environment. And this is a key outcome for expectations for UNEA 7, especially as we reflect on our theme, advancing sustainable solutions for a resilient planet. Sustainable solutions mean we have to look at every aspect of living here on planet Earth, including how we consume and how we dispose of our resources.
These international forums allow countries to integrate sustainable lifestyle initiatives into broader environmental strategies and commitments. This integration aims to harmonize shifts in consumption patterns with essential safeguards for consumer rights and needs, fostering a more equitable and sustainable future. During the summit's closing session, the moderator Helena Laurent, Director General of Consumers International, highlighted Consumer International's global reach, which boasts 200 consumer operations in 115 countries. The Director General also emphasized the urgency of the call to action of the theme for 2025, which is a just transition for sustainable lifestyles.
We need a transition that is fast, fair, and accountable. And we heard in the opening session that 40 to 70% of the solutions to our reaching emissions targets are in demand. The demand for us means consumers and how we're able to act as individuals in the economy. Every time we have heard a statistic during this week, it has been that a vast majority of us, we think 94% around the world, want a cleaner, greener economy. The problem is that it is difficult for us to do so. The system isn't set up for that, and we face affordability or accessibility challenges. It is not yet simple and easy. The financing is not yet in place.
Addressing the role of consumer advocates, Dr. Clark called for global partnerships to address the unique challenges faced by small island developing states SIDS.
It's all about global partnership and recognizing that, especially for small island developing states where we are not manufacturers but importers of products, that there needs to be a little bit more partnership in terms of reducing, reusing, and ensuring that goods that are made that at the production point, that it's more conscious in the production, that when we get here to our small islands, when we just don't have the space to dispose of so much waste, that we're more conscious of what the challenges that small island developing states have to face in importing so much goods that eventually become waste.
Dr. Clark's remarks highlight the importance of collaborative efforts to mitigate waste and promote sustainable consumption on a global scale.
Recognizing the harmful impact and increasing levels of plastic pollution on human health, climate change, and the natural environment, St. Kitts and Nevis joined the global community in advocating for plastic waste solutions. Is there a single intervention that policymakers can implement to solve plastic pollution? On the occasion of Global Recycling Day, the Minister of Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment, Dr. Joy L. Clark, aimed to empower individuals to implement effective waste management strategies, mainly through recycling.
Waste matters, and the only way to deal with waste is to recycle, reuse, and reduce. And these are key parts of our Sustainable Island State agenda, where we are pushing for the circular economy. It not only protects our environment, deals with waste, but also helps with economic diversification, providing opportunities through proper waste management, circularity, and upcycling. I remind us all here in St. Kitts and in Nevis to be very conscious about how we use our waste and also to recycle at every opportunity you get.
Clark expressed gratitude to the Taiwan ICDF mission, which launched a program in the Federation to promote local solutions and advancements towards plastic waste sustainability.
Today we want to use this opportunity to thank our long-standing partners, the Republic of China on Taiwan, through its work in the Taiwan ICDF program on this special project, the St. Kitts and Nevis Solid Waste Management and Recycling Project. We want to take this opportunity to tell everyone here in St. Kitts and Nevis that we must move towards recycling, and we've started with our plastic recycling program here in St. Kitts and on Nevis, and we want to continue.
Since the launch of the plastic waste recycling program in July 2021, the Taiwan ICDF mission, in collaboration with the Solid Waste Management Corporation St. Kitts and the Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority, made significant progress. They have collected 351,295.48 pounds of recyclables. In Nevis, a major shipment of plastic waste had been sent overseas for processing. On the other hand, St. Kitts is set to embark on a similar initiative, a step towards transitioning to a circular economy. The country has also introduced another proactive measure, which is the phased ban on single-use plastics. The Ministry of Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment continue its messaging that the plastic waste challenge requires a solution, but the power of collective action is critical in driving system change. Individuals, households, and the business community are encouraged to play their part in reducing plastic waste, as even the smallest action can contribute to a cleaner, greener planet. To foster widespread engagement and understanding across the communities, the Taiwan ICDF mission and the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment, through their respective departments, have encouraged proper recycling, raised environmental awareness, and encouraged active participation in reducing plastic waste. Global Recycling Day is celebrated annually on March 18. Members of the Federal Cabinet of St. Kitts and Nevis and the Nevis Island Administration, NIA, converged on Monday, March 17, for their second joint cabinet meeting in the Federation's history. The Federation's Prime Minister, Dr. Terence Drew, and Nevis's Premier, Mark Brantley, took center stage at the meeting. The cabinet meeting allowed for an open and productive discussion on matters pertinent to the nation and its people. In the view of Spencer Brand, NIA Minister responsible for the Ministry of Labour, Public Works, Physical Planning, Posts and the Environment, there was consensus, a spirit of unity, and a shared goal to ensure that the cabinet meeting served as a springboard towards the advancement of the nation.
So I just wanted to say, Weber, that I felt that it was a very good joint cabinet. I believe that the takeaways from it, and I believe that the goals and objectives that were set, I think, were achieved. And I would expect that both leaders would, give a much more comprehensive update as to what would have transpired. But for me, as a member of the Nevis Island Administration, the elected representative of St. Paul's, Charlestown, I believe that our voices heard around the table, and I think that both leaders would have stated their position on various issues. And I feel that at the end of the day, Weber, the conversation was what I felt was extremely important.
Drew and Brantley, also the leader of the opposition in the federal parliament, have formed a formidable relationship so far as two of the most powerful politicians in the Federation at present. However, St. Kitts and Nevis have been rife with the speculation about whether that relationship could ultimately rupture. Though predictions by a fraction of members of the opposition suggest a possible fallout would come, there have been renewed signs of committee between Prime Minister Drew and Premier Brantley. A guest on Bond Radio's Talk That Get Results on March 18, Brand said the joint cabinet meeting was timely, adding that even with divergent views on certain issues, having the dialogue was important. The joint cabinet meeting, held in St. Kitts at the Park Hyatt, focused on shared priorities, including national security, economic resilience, sustainability, and climate resilience. Drew and Brantley shared similar sentiments that inter-island cooperation should not be affected by political differences, thus emphasizing that the federal government and the Nevis Island administration must work together to address critical matters.
St. Kitts and Nevis commemorated World Consumer Rights Day on March 15, 2025, focusing on promoting sustainable lifestyles and protecting consumer rights in an evolving global landscape. The Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas, Minister of International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs, addressed the nation, highlighting the importance of adapting consumption habits to safeguard the planet and ensure fair social conditions for future generations. This year's observance theme was a just transition to sustainable lifestyles, urging consumers and businesses to adopt practices that minimize environmental degradation while supporting equitable socioeconomic development. Dr. Douglas emphasized the critical role of consumer protection in ensuring access to safe products and adequate information and effective redress for grievances.
World Consumer Rights Day is an annual international event that signifies celebration and solidarity throughout the international consumer movement. It is an opportunity to demand that consumer rights are respected and protected. Since being first introduced back in 1983 by Consumers International, World Consumer Rights Day has been celebrated annually on March the 15th each year. The celebration provides a platform for agencies and organizations involved in the promotion and protection of the rights of the consumer to highlight the importance of advocating for changes to existing policies which are associated with consumer transactions. Many of such policies, as currently constructed, would place consumers at a disadvantage.
He noted that empowered consumers are less susceptible to abuse, fostering a more equitable marketplace where businesses adhere to common standards and bolstering competition. Acknowledging the challenges posed by the current geopolitical climate, particularly the escalating global trade war led by the U.S., Dr. Douglas cautioned against the negative impacts on consumer rights. Trade wars, characterized by tariffs and trade barriers, can negatively impact consumer rights by increasing prices for goods and services, potentially reducing the range of available products and ultimately harming consumer welfare. This underscores the importance of consumer awareness and proactive measures to mitigate the adverse effects of trade disputes on the availability and affordability of essential goods and services. A key focus of Dr. Douglas's address was the need for businesses to embrace sustainable practices, particularly in packaging and production methods. He highlighted the growing demand from consumers for eco-conscious brands and the shift away from single-use plastics.
As businesses attempt to develop more sustainable ways to present and deliver their products to customers and consumers, they must be conscious of steady shifts that are developing among customers who are now beginning to demand that businesses be more responsible and eco-conscious in regard to the types of materials that are used in their products and their packaging as well.
He added that businesses that ignore this trend risk alienating a significant portion of the consumer base and potentially reducing revenue. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis is actively working towards a sustainable island state with initiatives such as the phased approach to managing plastic pollution, including the ban on single-use plastics.
Through the Ministry of Environment and Cooperatives, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis has undertaken extensive work to develop and set in motion a 5-year phased approach in the management of plastic pollution, which will ultimately result in the banning of single-use plastics within our federation.
The first stage of this initiative, a ban on importation of t-shirt shopping bags, is already underway, with complete implementation expected by November 2025. The Consumer Affairs Department will continue to monitor market trends, enforce consumer protection guidelines, and ensure that consumers benefit from initiatives like the VAT reduction. Dr. Douglas urged consumers to be responsible for the sustainability of the environment by properly disposing of waste and to make their voices heard when business policies negatively impact them. He encouraged citizens to contact the Department of Consumer Affairs for assistance and information, emphasizing that
the Department of Consumer Affairs, it remains readily available to assist you.
In regional news, St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Gonzalez in Venezuela for meeting with Maduro on tensions with Guyana. Guyana News source reports.
Well, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines announced that its prime minister and the interlocutor of the Argyle Declaration between Guyana and Venezuela, Dr. Ralph Gonzalez, had traveled to Venezuela to meet with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on the tensions with Guyana over the border controversy. In its statement, the government of St. Vincent said that Dr. Gonzalez was expected to meet with Mr. Maduro after traveling to Venezuela. The statement also said that Dr. Gonzalez spoke with President Irfan Ali on Monday, urging calm and restraint, and for both parties to return to diplomacy. The statement said that the Prime Minister also cautioned that an escalation into open conflict could devastate both nations economically and socially, and destabilize the entire Latin America and Caribbean region, potentially leaving the region with a humanitarian and refugee crisis. He advised both Guyana and Venezuela to resolve the matter so it does not lead to an open conflict. Tensions between Guyana and Venezuela escalated 2 weeks ago after an incursion by a Venezuelan Navy vessel in Guyana's waters. During that incursion, the military vessel sailed to the oil ships operating within Guyana's waters and questioned the captains via radio about their presence in the area, their activities, and the number of people on board. The officials on board the Venezuelan Navy vessel also falsely claimed that the oil ships were operating within Venezuelan waters. Guyana was forced to dispatch sea and aerial surveillance support, and the government of Guyana alerted the international community to the threatening incident. In an address to the nation hours after the incident 2 weeks ago, President Irfan Ali stated that the incident was a serious escalation by the Maduro regime. The US, the UK, CARICOM, the Commonwealth, and the OAS were quick in their condemnation of the Venezuelan government and its actions and their support for Guyana. Prime Minister Gonzalez, in a statement of his own, indicated that it is clear that the oil ships are operating within Guyana waters. However, he also said he believes tensions will remain between Guyana and Venezuela, even after the International Court of Justice hands down a ruling on the case before it that was filed by Guyana. That case is seeking to confirm the validity of the 1899 settlement of the border dispute. In December 2023, President Irfan Ali and the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro met in St. Vincent at the Argyle International Airport. Following the discussions between the two presidents, the Argyle Declaration was issued, stating that they will not threaten or use force against one another in any circumstances, including those that are consequential to any existing controversy between the two nations. In December 2023, the International Court of Justice also handed down provisional measures in the case before it, which essentially blocked Venezuela from taking any action that could change the current situation in the Essequibo region. In its unanimous decision handed down in The Hague, the court ordered that Venezuela refrains from taking any action which could modify the situation that currently prevails in the Essequibo, whereby Guyana administers and exercises control over the area. The International Court also ordered both Guyana and Venezuela to refrain from any action which might aggravate or extend the dispute before the court or make it more difficult to resolve. Guyana has complained that since then Venezuela has flouted both the court order and the Argyle Declaration, by continuing with its claims of the Essequibo, planning governor elections for Guyana's Essequibo, and having its military vessel illegally enter Guyana's waters. President Ali has already indicated that he will not meet with the Venezuelan president in wake of those actions by Caracas.
Grenada's Dr. Keith Mitchell is doing well following a medical emergency. Grenada Broadcasting Network has that story.
Former Prime Minister and immediate past opposition leader Dr. Keith Mitchell is said to be doing well. This follows a night of concern among many, having watched in person or online as the man who led the nation for years experienced what appeared to be a medical emergency on Monday evening while addressing supporters of the new National Party at a meeting in his constituency. Dr. Mitchell had organized the meeting to present his response to the current national budget. In his true style, he launched into the doings of the Deacon Mitchell-led administration. But then there was a sudden change.
If you don't have the equipment, the medication, the trained staff, and the way you treat them, sisters and brothers, I'm blacking out.
The meeting was cancelled following the incident at the Happy Hill Secondary School. The Office of the Prime Minister swiftly issued a statement acknowledging Dr. Mitchell's sudden collapse. Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell expressed his well wishes and asked that the nation keeps Dr. Keith Mitchell in their prayers. Opposition leader Emmeline Pierre also addressed the situation, reassuring the public that Dr. Mitchell is doing well. She explained what transpired.
Dr. Mitchell began to share his personal experience witnessing the death of someone extremely close to him who passed on just the day before. He obviously became emotionally overwhelmed and showed signs that he was fainting off. Shortly after, maybe about 15 minutes thereafter, he was fully recovered and was able to remain for the conclusion of the session, after which he left for his residence. Dr. Mitchell remains in great spirit and he is well.
Dr. Mitchell's medical emergency at the public meeting has drawn an outpouring of support from the Grenadian people at home and in the diaspora, with many taking to social media to share their best wishes for his speedy recovery. President of the Senate, Dr. Decima Williams, during Tuesday's Senate debate, also extended best wishes to Dr. Mitchell.
On behalf of the Senate, I wish Dr. Mitchell best wishes for his good health.
Cherry Blackman Stephen, GBN News.
We now bring you these international reports.
The EU will tighten steel import quotas to reduce inflows by a further 15% from April. The news came from an EU official on Wednesday. It's aimed at preventing cheap steel flooding the European market after Washington imposed new tariffs. European steel producers are already battling high energy prices and competition from Asia and elsewhere. They warn that the EU risks becoming a dumping ground for cheap steel diverted from the US market, which they say could kill off Europe's plants. European Commission Executive Vice President Stéphane Séjourne.
There would be no country without steel, and so there is no collective organisation and industry of chemistry or defence without steel. And so steel is becoming a strategic sector for us that must be defended. We will try with our tools, and I think it is reasonable for the European Commission to follow international rules. I think that if there is a need today to have an actor in the world who gives predictability, who respects international law, who is also able to have a rule of law, in short, to have a regulatory environment that is predictable, it is the European Union.
The CEO of Europe's number 2 steelmaker ThyssenKrupp said on Wednesday the US imported around 23 million metric tons of steel last year, and that those volumes were now looking for other destinations, including Europe, as a result of US import tariffs. The Commission is to propose a raft of trade-related measures to boost its ailing metals industry and will also consult aluminium producers facing similar headaches to steelmakers.
Moscow believes the latest telephone conversation between President Trump and Vladimir Putin went well. Certainly for the Kremlin. The Russian leader is yet to be pressured into any major concessions and is stalling on the unconditional 30-day ceasefire. Volodymyr Zelensky spoke with President Trump to get an update on those negotiations. It is unlikely he will be reassured by the tone coming from the White House, nor the commitments and assurances given by the Russian president. The Kremlin said it would observe a mutual moratorium on the targeting of energy infrastructure, and within an hour of giving that commitment, the Russians launched 150 drones overnight, the hospital in the Sumy region that was hit, among other transport and civilian infrastructure.
There were 150 drones overnight, targeting energy infrastructure, among other things. There were strikes against transport. 2 hospitals were unfortunately hit. In other words, Putin's words are very much at odds with reality.
Not only did Moscow not agree to an unconditional ceasefire, President Putin set further red lines for peace. They include an end to Western military aid to Kyiv and intelligence sharing, as well as an end to the mobilization in Ukraine. Naturally, that would lead to Ukraine's capitulation. A short time ago, the US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz was asked whether military aid to Ukraine had cropped up in that conversation. It did not, he said. Well, let's get some reaction and speak to our State Department correspondent Tom Bateman. Let's start with the phone call. Has there been any readout of what was discussed?
Nothing at all. All we know is that it was due to start at 10 a.m. local time, so that's an hour ago. And then we await more from the White House. I mean, I think the important thing to say is, as far as we know, this is the first direct contact between President Trump and Zelensky since he was unceremoniously ejected from the White House, having been told he was ungrateful and disrespectful by Mr. Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. And we then saw, military and intelligence assistance to the Ukrainians cut off in a move to apply intense pressure to them to sign up to President Trump's proposal for a full and immediate ceasefire. That was then reinstated, of course, when the Ukrainians agreed to that plan by President Trump, which was for that ceasefire, which would take effect across the front line, a truce at ground, sea and air. And of course, what we then saw in the space of a week last night with the call between Presidents Trump and Putin was Mr. Trump effectively retreat significantly on that position. So you now have the proposal for a much more limited truce, as you've been saying, and it's not clear actually. The Americans have talked about this in both terms, whether it's just energy infrastructure or energy and infrastructure, and there's been confusion between the two readouts from the White House and the Kremlin on this as well. So we're trying to understand what exactly the ceasefire proposal is supposed to encompass. But what you have seen now, of course, is this is now the new proposal. And the next stage in this should be talks between the Americans and the Russians, potentially in Saudi Arabia on Sunday, but there's still some confusion about whether that is a technical level discussion about how to implement this new truce proposal, the more limited one, or whether it's going to involve the principles, as they're called, so the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz and Mr. Witkoff as well. Still a lack of clarity on that, but it looks like the Americans are trying to push things forward in terms of discussions with the Russians.
Record greenhouse gas levels helped bring temperatures to an all-time high in 2024, the UN weather body said on Wednesday, accelerating glacier and sea ice loss, raising sea levels and edging the world closer to a key warming threshold. Annual average mean temperatures stood at 1.55 degrees Celsius or 2.79 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels last year. Countries agreed in the 2015 Paris Agreement to strive to limit temperature increases to within 1.5 degrees Celsius above the 1850 to 1900 average. The number surpasses the previous 2023 record by 0.1 degrees Celsius, the World Meteorological Organization said in its annual climate report. John Kennedy, the lead author of the WMO report, explains its significance.
One thing to kind of point out very clearly is that one single year above 1.5 degrees wouldn't mean that the level mentioned in the Paris Agreement had been formally exceeded. The Paris Agreement is usually taken to refer to long-term averages, some kind of multi-year or even multi-decadal average of temperature. So 1 year doesn't exceed that.
But he says uncertainty ranges in the data means it cannot be ruled out. The report said other factors could also have driven global temperature rises last year, including changes in the solar cycle, a massive volcanic eruption, and a decrease in cooling aerosols. Extreme weather wreaked havoc across the globe, with droughts causing food shortages and floods and wildfires displacing 800,000 people, the highest since records began in 2008. Ocean heat also reached its highest on record, and the rate of warming is accelerating, with rising ocean CO2 concentrations also driving up acidification levels. Glaciers and sea ice continued to melt at a rapid rate. Here's oceanographer Karina von Schuckmann.
As a consequence of a warming ocean and also as a consequence of melt from land ice, the ocean sea level is rising. As you can see here an estimate from satellite altimetry starting in 1993 up to 24, there is a continued increase in sea level. And in 24, the global mean sea level reached a record high in the satellite record. So from 2015 to 2024, the sea level rose at an annual rate of 4.7 millimeters, and is compared to a value of 2.1 millimeters from 1993 to 2002.
The report authors state the long-term implications of the melting ice can affect the overall circulation of the oceans, which affects the climate around the world.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
8 years on, the Nevis Athletic Stadium lies incomplete at Low Ground Estate.
St. Kitts Nevis Sustainability Minister advocates for retransition to sustainable lifestyles at International Summit.
Global Recycling Day. Minister Joel Clark promotes a more sustainable future by encouraging recycling and reducing plastic waste. Nevis Island Administration Minister Spencer Brand says the joint cabinet meeting was timely and important.
St. Kitts Nevis focuses on sustainable consumption in commemoration of World Consumer Rights Day 2025. St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Gonzalez in Venezuela for meeting with Maduro on tensions with Guyana. Grenada's Dr. Keith Mitchell is doing well following a medical emergency. Internationally, European Union proposes cutting steel imports by 15% as U.S. tariffs bite.
Thank you for listening.